Wonder Lesson 4. Good morning, grade 5s. It's another week, and today we're going to continue reading Wonder. So for today's lesson, we are going to again do 4 chapters. 2 of the chapters will be read to you. Then you need to read one of the chapters by yourself, and then finally you will do another chapter by yourself, but this one you'll do a comprehension on. And when you've done all of that, you're going to get the opportunity to play a game where you practice your parts of speech. It's on a website and it's a bit of fun, and there's different levels if you are struggling or you find it too easy, but we'll discuss that at the end of today's lesson. So to start off with, let's look at the answers to the comprehension you needed to complete on Thursday. Now you needed to make sure that you answered in full sentence. I've just included the answers for today so that you can see what the main part is, so that you understand if your comprehension is correct. As I go through them, I am going to put them into full sentence. If you don't have the exact wording, it's not wrong. Just make sure that your wording includes what needs to be there. So for question 1, the answer is August's dog's name is Daisy. There are a lot of different ways you could have phrased that, but the important part is, do you know that his dog's name is Daisy? Question 2. August thinks that Julian is the least nice of the 3 students he met that day. You could also just say that August does not think that Julian is nice, because if you look at the chapter, he says both things. Question 3. Mom describes Julian's personality as being friendly in front of adults or nice. So he's got one personality in front of adults and he has another in front of people his own age. So his peers, his friends, his age group. Question 4. No, I do not think that Mom has a headache. And the reason that we know this is because they use the word like in the sentence. And when they use that, it becomes a simile. So if you look at the sentence, it is a simile. And we know that similes compare two things. So if they are comparing two things, they're not going to use her having a headache and compare it to her having a headache. They're going to use her frustration and compare it to what she would do if she had a headache. Okay? So the answer there is no. If you have another reason that backs it up, I'm happy to accept it, especially since it asked you what you think. Question 5, nudge means to touch or push gently or gradually. So you can nudge people or you can nudge objects.
First day jitters. Okay, so I admit that the first day of school, I was so nervous that the butterflies in my stomach were more like pigeons flying around my insides. Mom and Dad were probably a little nervous too, but they acted all excited for me, taking pictures of me and Via before we left the house, since it was Via's first day of school too. Up until a few days before, we still weren't sure I would be going to school at all. After my tour of the school, Mom and Dad had reversed sides on whether I should go or not. Mom was now the one saying I shouldn't go, and Dad was saying I should. Dad had told me he was really proud of how I'd handled myself with Julian, and that I was turning into quite the strong man. And I heard him tell Mom that he now thought she had been right all along. But Mom, I could tell, wasn't so sure anymore. When Dad told her that he and Via wanted to walk me to school today, too, since it was on the way to the subway station, Mom seemed relieved that we would all be going together. And I guess I was too. Even though Beecher Prep is just a few blocks from our house, I've only been on that block a couple of times before. In general, I try to avoid blocks where there are a lot of kids roaming around. On our block, everybody knows me, and I know everybody. I know every brick and every tree trunk and every crack in the sidewalk. I know Mrs. Grimaldi, the lady who's always sitting by her window, and the old guy who walks up and down the street whistling like a bird. I know the deli on the corner where Mom gets our bagels and the waitresses at the coffee shop who all call me honey and give me lollipops whenever they see me. I love my neighborhood of North River Heights, which is why it was so strange to be walking down these blocks feeling like it was all new to me suddenly. Amersfoort Avenue, a street I've been down a million times, looked totally different for some reason, full of people I'd never seen before, waiting for buses, pushing strollers. We crossed Amersfoort and turned up Heights Place. Via walked next to me like she usually does, and Mom and Dad were behind us. As soon as we turned the corner, we saw all the kids in front of the school, hundreds of them talking to each other in little groups, laughing or standing with their parents who were talking with other parents. I kept my head way down. Everybody's just as nervous as you are, said Via in my ear. Just remember that this is everyone's first day of school, okay? Mr. Tushman was greeting students and parents in front of the school entrance. I have to admit, so far, nothing bad had happened. I didn't catch anyone staring or even noticing me. Only once did I look up to see some girls looking my way and whispering with their hands cupped over their mouths, but they looked away when they saw me notice them. We reached the front entrance. Okay, so this is it, big boy, said Dad, putting his hands on top of my shoulders. Have a great first day. I love you, said Via, giving me a big kiss and a hug. You too, I said. I love you, Augie, said Dad, hugging me. Bye. Then Mom hugged me, but I could tell she was about to cry, which would have totally embarrassed me, so I just gave her a fast, hard hug, turned, and disappeared into the school.
So you just heard about August's first day of school. And unusual for many kids, his first day of school is in grade 5. So he's been to school in a sense that he's done schooling, he's done work, but that was a homeschool. He's never been to a formal school. So I want to know from you, how did you feel on your first day of school? He was nervous. I know I was nervous on my first day of grade 5, and I had been in school with the kids I was with all 4 years of school so far. Have you ever started at a new school? Or can you remember how you felt when you were in grade 1? Share some of those feelings. You're now going to listen to the second chapter for today.
Locks. I went straight to room 301 on the 3rd floor. Now I was glad I'd gone on that little tour because I knew exactly where to go and didn't have to look up once. I noticed that some kids were definitely staring at me now. I did my thing of pretending not to notice. I went inside the classroom and the teacher was writing on the chalkboard while all the kids started sitting at different desks. The desks were in a half circle facing the chalkboard, so I chose the desk in the middle toward the back, which I thought would make it harder for anyone to stare at me. I still kept my head way down, just looking up enough from under my bangs to see everyone's feet. As the desks started to fill up, I did notice that no one sat down next to me. A couple of times, someone was about to sit next to me, then changed his or her mind at the last minute and sat somewhere else. Hey, August! It was Charlotte, giving me her little wave as she sat down at a desk in the front of the class. Why anyone would ever choose to sit way up in front in a class, I don't know. Hey, I said, nodding hello. Then I noticed Julian was sitting a few seats away from her, talking to some other kids. I know he saw me, but he didn't say hello. Suddenly, someone was sitting down next to me. It was Jackwell. Jack. What's up, he said, nodding at me. Hey, Jack, I answered, waving my hand, which I immediately wished I hadn't done, because it felt kind of uncool. Okay, kids, okay, everybody, settle down, said the teacher, now facing us. She had written her name, Miss Petosa, on the chalkboard. Everybody find a seat, please. Come in, she said to a couple of kids who had just walked in the room. There's a seat there, and right there. She hadn't noticed me yet. Now, the first thing I want everyone to do is stop talking and, she noticed me, put your backpacks down and quiet down. She had only hesitated for a millionth of a second, but I could tell the moment she saw me. Like I said, I'm used to it by now. I'm going to take attendance and do the seating chart, she continued, sitting on the edge of her desk. Next to her were 3 neat rows of accordion folders. When I call your name, come up and I'll hand you a folder with your name on it. It contains your class schedule and your combination lock, which you should not try to open until I tell you to. Your locker number is written on the class schedule. Be forewarned that some lockers are not right outside this class, but down the hall, and before anyone even thinks of asking, no, you cannot switch lockers, and you can't switch locks. Then, if there's time at the end of this period, we're all going to get to know each other a little better, okay? Okay. She picked up the clipboard on her desk and started reading the names out loud. Okay, so, Julian Albans, she said, looking up. Julian raised his hand and said, here, at the same time. Hi, Julian, she said, making a note on her seating chart. She picked up the very first folder and held it out towards him. Come pick it up, she said, kind of no nonsense. He got up and took it from her. Jimena Chin, she handed a folder to each kid as she read off the names. As she went down the list, I noticed that the seat next to me was the only one still empty, even though there were 2 kids sitting at one desk just a few seats away. When she called the name of one of them, a big kid named Henry Joplin, who already looked like a teenager, she said, Henry, there's an empty desk right over there. Why don't you take that seat, okay? She handed him his folder and pointed to the desk next to mine. Although I didn't look at him directly, I could tell Henry did not want to move next to me, just by the way he dragged his backpack on the floor as he came over, like he was moving in slow motion. Then he plopped his backpack up really high on the right side of the desk, so it was kind of like a wall between his desk and mine. Maya Markovitz, Miss Petosa was saying. Here, said a girl about 4 desks down from me. Miles Norrie. Here, said the kid that had been sitting with Henry Joplin. As he walked back to his desk, I saw him shoot Henry a poor you look. August Pullman, said Miss Petosa. Here, I said quietly, raising my hand a little bit. Hi, August, she said, smiling at me very nicely when I went up to get my folder. I kind of felt everyone's eyes burning into my back for the few seconds I stood in the front of the class, and everybody looked down when I walked back to my desk. I resisted spinning the combination when I sat down, even though everyone else was doing it, because she had specifically told us not to. I was already pretty good at opening locks anyway, because I've used them on my bike. Henry keeps trying to open his lock, but couldn't do it. He was getting frustrated and kind of cursing under his breath. Miss Petosa called out the next few names. The last name was Jack Will. After she handed Jack his folder, she said, Okay, so everybody write your combinations down somewhere safe that you won't forget, okay? But if you do forget, what happens at least 3.2 times per semester, Mrs. Garcia has a list of all the combination numbers. Now, go ahead, take your locks out of your folders, and spend a couple of minutes practicing how to open them. Though I know some of you went ahead and did that anyway. She was looking at Henry when she said that. And in the meanwhile, I'll tell you guys a little something about myself. And then you guys can tell me a little about yourselves. And we'll, get to know each other. Sounds good? Good. She smiled at everyone, though I felt like she was smiling at me the most. It wasn't a shiny smile like Mrs. Garcia's smile, but a normal smile, like she meant it. She looked very different from what I thought teachers were going to look like. I guess I thought she'd look like Mrs. Fell from Jimmy Neutron, an old lady with a big bun on top of her head. But in fact, she looked exactly like Mon Mothma from Star Wars Episode 4. Hair cut kind of like a boy's, and a big white shirt kind of like a tunic. She turned around and started writing on the chalkboard. Henry still couldn't get his lock to open, and he was getting more and more frustrated every time someone else popped one open. He got really annoyed when I was able to open mine on the first try. The funny thing is, if he hadn't had put the backpack between us, I most definitely would have offered to help him.
So at Beecher Prep, they are given the option of where to sit, and Mrs. Petosa only moves one kid in the class. So I want to know from you, if you could choose where you got to sit in class for the whole year, where would you sit and why? You might choose to sit in the front in the middle, right in front of the board. You may choose to sit at the back. You may choose to sit by a window, by the door. Please tell me where you want to sit and give me the reason why. Please be honest. I know some of you want to sit at the back so that you can talk to your friends. This is not for me to judge you. It is to think about your reasoning. And can you give a reason for the choices you make? You are now required to read the next chapter of Wonder by yourself. For this chapter, I want you to read it aloud. You don't need to read it necessarily to another person, but it does help, especially if you are nervous. And the chapter that you're going to read aloud is Around the Room, which is chapter 15 of Wonder. Now that you have read Around the Room, I want to know what would be the one thing you would share if you had been in Mrs. Petosa's class. So feel like it is your first day of school and you get to share one thing about yourself. And you've heard what the other students have shared, you've read what they've shared. To be precise, what would you share if it was now your turn? The last chapter we're going to look at today is Lamb to the Slaughter. So I want you to read the chapter on your own individually and then answer the comprehension questions that follow. Today's comprehension, you've only got 3 questions. Please answer them in full sentence. Question 1. What does the phrase, like a lamb to the slaughter, mean? Question 2. What is a Padawan? And question 3. Have you watched Star Wars? Who is your favorite character? So they list a few characters there. You don't have to use one that's been given. You can choose any character. And if you haven't watched Star Wars, you can just write there, no, I have not watched Star Wars. Because if you haven't watched it, you are unlikely to have a favorite character. If for some reason you still have a favorite character, feel free to mention the character. Just think about the word that you would use. So if I say, yes, I have watched Star Wars, my favorite character is, and my favorite character is, you're going to use the conjunction and. If you're going to say, no, you have not watched Star Wars, you are not going to use the conjunction and, you would use the conjunction but. Because even though you haven't watched Star Wars, you still have a favorite character. We are done for today, but before you go and continue with something else, I want you to take a couple of minutes and to play the word invasion game that can be found at the link on your screen. It tests parts of speech, and when you enter the game, it allows you to select and deselect certain options. All of the options will be selected when you go in. Please don't deselect them unless you want to focus on a particular part of speech later on. And please play on normal speed. If you are struggling or find it is too easy, you can always go back and restart with a slower speed or a faster speed. I hope that you enjoyed the 4 chapters of Wonder we looked at today. From tomorrow, we're going to be doing fewer chapters, but we're going to be looking at the chapter more in depth. And more importantly, the pack that went home today included a small pack or activity pack on Wonder. We're going to be completing a couple of pages from that each day, and we may jump around. So please keep that with you whenever you sit down for English.